Class Wars is a TF2 game mode that is absolutely crazy. At the beginning of each round, each team is randomly assigned a class, and everyone on that team has to play that class for the entire round. I have a bit of experience myself with this mode, playing it a couple times on my channel and generally having a lot of fun with it, but today I wanted to do something a little bit different and tier every single class because a lot of people don't really know the matchups the first couple times playing. Trust me, you will figure them out very quickly once you play, but I still think a tier list representing how good or bad each class is certainly helpful. Before I just jump into it, there are a couple things with the tier list itself that I want to explain. I have unfortunately had to set this up in a rather complex way because I tried doing this simply and, yeah, it didn't exactly work. There's a lot of information that I think will go completely under the radar if I combine all of the classes. So instead of rating 9 classes like you might expect, I'm going to be rating 27. You can see that I have split each class up into 3, one being A, one being D, and one being E. A stands for attack, D stands for defense, and E stands for what I'm calling even, or any map where both teams are doing the exact same objective, like King of the Hill, capture the flag, and so on. The reason that I have done this is because I personally find that some classes are much better on one role than they are the other, and I wanted to split them up like this, so that way you can get a better visualization of when classes are going to be good, because the attacking experience is much different than the defending experience. I will also note, and this shouldn't be something that I would have to say, but I'll say it anyway, this is from my own personal experience with Class Wars. A very good majority of the time that I have on Class Wars is on Dust Bowl, because that's what most servers run. However, very recently I have been playing a couple rotation servers with a variety of maps, so I do have a pretty good idea of what's going on maps like King of the Hill, Capture the Flag, and other attack, defend, or payload maps that aren't Dust Bowl. Because of that, my opinions on certain classes may be skewed because of Dust Bowl, but I think the general placement is still pretty accurate for each mode, unless I were to break every single class down by every single mode, in which case I'd be here for years. There are just some exceptions that I'm going to have to make, and that's just a fair warning. Second of all, I am not going to be counting roll the dice in the tiering. Roll the dice is a very stupid mechanic, and anyone who says that it exists to break stalemates does not know what they are talking about. And finally, more of a general rule that I'll give is some of the matchups that I might put on this tier list may seem unintuitive. For instance, you may think that, oh, why did I say that X class can beat Y class when usually it's the opposite? Well, you have to think that this isn't a question of can one of X class beat one of Y class, it's can 16 of X class beat 16 of Y class. And because of some of the nuances that change when you stack the teams with one class or another, a lot of matchups do get shifted in ways that they normally wouldn't in a 1v1 scenario, so that's kind of where some of the less intuitive matchups that I'm placing are coming from. As for the tiers are pretty self-explanatory. I will say the top and the bottom tier, which are colorless, are for singular exceptions that I think either entirely break the game or are basically just surrender magnets. There's only going to be one class in either of those tiers, so that's why I'm putting them there. The colored tiers, on the other hand, I mean, I've titled them in ways that make sense, except for Sands, which you might be looking at scratching your head, but the reason that I titled it Sands is because if you get a class in this tier, you're gonna have a bad time. Oh, and one more thing that I will clarify is throughout the video, you'll be seeing these little matchup graphics that I've made to kind of give you a visual aid of which classes tend to do better against others. Those are not the only things that I've used to determine who's going in what tier. So even if someone has like better matchups on that graphic than someone else, there are numerous factors that I've used to consider where someone's going. So don't look at that graphic and think like, oh, that's dumb. Someone else had like better matchups, more arrows, and they're on a lower tier. That's more so you can get an understanding of what classes tend to do well where. Anyway, enough of the intro. Sorry, there was a lot to explain there. Let's get started. Starting off, we have Scout. Scout in normal TF2 is much more of a pit class than he is a power class, and because of that, his performance in a mode where you're only allowed to play as Scout is drastically reduced, to say the least. He still does pretty well in modes where you're allowed to roam the map a lot more freely, but in more streamlined modes like attack, defense, or payload or whatever, Scout kind of gets wrecked by a lot of the power classes. Now, that being said, I would rather have Scout over a lot of characters. I don't think he's terrible by any means, but he is by no means my first choice of a class. So let's break it down into each of the roles. First of all, Scout on attack actually does pretty well. Unlike a lot of other classes, Attack Scout is significantly better than Defense Scout because of his tendency to kind of break through the back lines and back cap. If you're playing on defense and you're playing against a bunch of scouts who are on attack, one of the things you really have to watch out for is scouts who are back capping, and because of that, you naturally have to play a little bit farther back, closer to the last point than you otherwise would have to, and that does inherently give scouts a bit of advantages because that means that sometimes, like on point 2 of Dust Bowl, you can't take advantage of some of the natural choke points like the tunnels because you have to play so close to the point. Scout also has the Bonk Atomic Punch, which drastically helps his attack effectiveness much more than his defense effectiveness. Because a lot of scouts can pop Bonk and just run straight through enemy lines at the same time, you really have to be careful of scouts who manage to slip by and cap. Now, this is a lot less effective on payload, but I think that is kind of canceled out on payload by the fact that the scouts can kind of be anywhere on the map. There's a lot more flank routes typically on payload maps than there are on attack defend maps that you can take advantage of, which means that scouts can spread out, which is what they naturally want to do. So I'm going to put Attack Scout on pretty average. He doesn't fare too well against Soldier, Pyro, Demo, Heavy, and Engineer, but he does fare pretty decently against defending scouts, medics, spies, and snipers, and 4 out of 9 as far as class wars goes is actually pretty good. The defense scout, on the other hand, does not have the luxuries. Attacking scout, again, it's kind of unusual that scout is better on attack than defense. Most classes have it the other way around, but defensive scout just doesn't have the same ability to kind of pressure random areas of the map like attacking scout can. You have to play close to the point, and scout, being a squishy class with no means of dealing with multiple enemies at the same time, does not do very well. So he goes in the minimal chance category because the only classes that he can really beat are spies, sometimes medics, and snipers. Now, scouts on symmetrical maps, on the other hand, are pretty similar to attacking scouts, especially if you're playing like King of the Hill. You can kind of run anywhere you want, which drastically helps the effectiveness of scout. When you can kind of finagle it to get more 1v1 oriented fights versus like 16 scouts fighting 16 whatevers at the same time, which typically doesn't go too well, that makes them a whole lot better than they would otherwise be. Unfortunately, they still do get kind of wrecked by a lot of classes, but I would say that they're actually better than attacking scouts. They still only have about 4.5 good matchups, which isn't great by any means, but it's definitely better than it could be, so it's also going an average above attacking scout. Oh, and before I move on, I wasn't going to talk about weapons a whole lot in this tier list, but I will at least mention some of the great weapons that characters have to deal with some of their worst matchups. First of all, Mad Milk is really, really good for scouts because you can throw it into crowds of enemies, and that drastically increases your entire team's survivability. The fact that you basically have like 0 cooldown on your Mad Milk when your entire team is spamming it means that enemies are pretty much constantly going to be milked, which gives scouts much better survivability than they otherwise would. I think that single-handedly shifts a lot of matchups, at least kind of in their favor. Like, for instance, against heavies, scouts still get beat pretty consistently, but if you just constantly throw milks at the heavies, that really softens the blow of the matchup that would otherwise be a complete and total wipe. Same thing for Bonk Atomic Punch. Bonk is a lifesaver for scouts. The fact that you even can just run invincibly behind enemy lines means that enemies have to play a little bit more cautiously. They can't just spawn camp you, because in the event that one scout gets out, he can very easily clear out a decent portion of the back line if he ends up 1v1ing. So that's a very good tool in Scout's kit. I think most of his primaries and melees are pretty straightforward, but his secondaries do provide a lot of utility that otherwise wouldn't be there. Soldier, being the jack of all trades, master of none class, inevitably makes him really, really good on average in a mode like this because, I mean, just spamming soldiers in casual is a really good strategy. Spamming soldiers in class wars is also a great strategy. As a whole, Soldier has quite a few weapons that allow him to be great in a variety of situations. For instance, the shotguns allow good matchups against pyros. Banners are really, really good. The fact that your entire team can basically have at least 2 banners up at any given time means that Soldier has really good damage, really good survivability, and all of that's on top of the naturally good damage and survivability he already has. So you can really make like packs of soldiers extremely dangerous just by spamming banners. Soldier is probably, in my opinion, one of the best classes across all three of his variants, just because, again, he's so suited for every type of situation that he naturally ends up being really, really good. But yeah, let's break it down into the roles. Attacking Soldier is probably the worst one, actually, just because there are a couple classes on defense that he really just can't deal with, even with his stalemate breaking tools like banners. It really does hold him back in a lot of ways. Engineers, for instance, he really can't deal with wranglers and short circuits. Heavies on defense are another powerhouse that you just don't quite have the damage to compete with. These aren't like horrible matchups by any means. I think that you can still win like maybe 35 or 40% of the time, but they are weaker matchups for the Soldier nonetheless that are kind of being counted against him in this case. Put him in usually successful. I think that especially on payload, you can do really well with just attacking soldiers, but I wouldn't say that attacking soldiers is an easy win against every single class by any means. I think that there are still enough of them that give you a headache to prevent that from being the case. Defense Soldier, on the other hand, kind of mops the floor with, like, almost every single class. Just the fact that you can have, like, that many classes spamming cow manglers, direct hits, every single rocket launcher in your kit is going to be insane to just spam down corridors. The fact that you can have 16 soldiers doing that at the same time means that there's not a corridor that's going unspammed in the entire game. And you will, even if you, like, happen to lose the first point on, like, Dust Bowl or some of the weird other attack, defend, or payload maps that you can have, most of the last points are just easy. All you have to do is just spam down whatever corridor you think people might be coming from, and especially if everyone's running the Cow Mangler and you can't run out of ammo, you can just do that for the entire game with basically no contest. Defense Soldier is an easy win, and Soldier on symmetrical maps kind of continues that trend. I don't think he's as good. The fact that you do have to rocket jump to the front lines for a decent chance to kind of speed up the game does hurt a lot, because health packs in Class Wars, I guess as a general rule going forward, are very scarce. Demoman, I think, suffers from this a lot more, but the fact that you have to take away from your own health to speed up your entry to the front lines does hurt, because you're probably not going to get that back unless you're running, like, the Black Box, the Conch, or something. But the fact that on maps that I see running on Class Wars servers a lot, like Sweden and Harvest, Soldier dominates on those maps because he can rocket jump up to the higher tiers of mid, especially on High Tower. Holy crap, Soldier just wins High Tower. In fact, I don't think I've ever seen Soldiers lose on High Tower. It's one of the freest wins you can get for Soldier, but his versatility in movement, damage, and really everything else makes him really, really good for symmetrical modes, and he's probably one of the best classes that you can get in a mode like King of the Hill, Capture the Flag, or Payload Race, if we're being honest. As far as weapons go, like I mentioned, banners are really, really good for Soldier. The direct hit and the Cow Mangler are really good for spam, especially if I said I wasn't going to count RTD, but in the event that someone happens to roll Dispenser, that just makes direct hits even better, because that basically means you have infinite reserve ammo. Soldier just has so much stuff that allows him to combat, like, every type of situation that there isn't really an instance where Soldier is going to struggle, which in a mode like Class Wars is really, really good. Pyro's matchups are pretty decisive, or in other words, you will either destroy the enemy team with no remorse, or you will get destroyed with no remorse. There isn't really a middle ground with Pyro. The reason that Pyro is so good in that regard is because on teams that he is dominating, the most logical conclusion to the match is Pyro's just sitting around spawn camping. Especially on maps where you're defending or you're doing the same objective, it's very easy for Pyros to push up to the enemy spawn and just spam flames at the spawn door. Now, that being said, Pyro's bad matchups usually in the opposite, because, again, the nature of him being short range means that most people realize, oh, all we have to do is stand barely outside of Pyro's effective range and spam into a corridor or whatever, and even though Pyro has Air Blast can't really compete with spam. That's kind of another instance of, even though, like, Pyro can beat a soldier regularly in a 1v1, 16 Pyros cannot beat 16 soldiers. There is no way your entire team is coordinating Air Blast like that, so you kind of get spammed out by every stretch of the imagination. So because of that, again, a lot of Pyro's matchups are very heavily weighted in one way or another, with a very few close matchups. Attacking Pyro, unfortunately, is not very good in the grand scheme of things, especially compared to his older cousins here, because you have to actually push up as attacking Pyro, and you can't just spawn camp a lot of the time. You struggle quite a bit. Now, that being said, I think that you can still just, like, run forward with the Flog, and you're going to have a pretty easy time against, like, 4 out of the 9 classes, but the other 5 classes do kind of camp you out in a very similar way, and it's very difficult for you to make any kind of ground against that level of spam. I'm going to put him in pretty average. Again, 4 out of 9 classes is not bad by any means, especially compared to what you could be getting instead, but it isn't the best either. Defensive Pyros, on the other hand, have better matchups. I think defensive Pyros and attacking Pyros have pretty much the same, except it is much easier for defensive Pyros to kind of steamroll really most classes in the game. The only classes that I think you can't really spawn camp are engineers, because it's really easy for them to get like a single mini up, wrangle it, and then you're kind of out of luck. And heavies, because heavies have much higher close range DPS and kind of shred anyone who's hoping to be cheeky with the Flog. That being said, even soldiers and demos, which are classes that can usually deal with pyros pretty easily, do have a bit of a hard time getting out of spawn, and because of that, you can burn down a lot of their clock that they would otherwise need to push up, especially like the last point of Dust Bowl. So I'm going to put defensive Pyro in usually successful. I think that, again, he still has a couple of struggling matchups, and if you can't get the spawn camp in, then you can very easily lose ground very quickly, but it's just so easy for Pyros to spawn camp with the Flog. Like, every single match that I get defensive Pyro on that's not against heavies or engineers, it's literally just Pyros spawn camping with the Flog. Even Pyros, I think, goes a very similar way as defensive Pyros, especially on maps like Sweden or Harvest or whatever, where the enemy team really only has like one spawn area to come out of. It's equally as easy to spawn camp. The problem is, taking and holding the point can be a little bit more difficult on some of the more open maps. On maps like Sweden, it's a bit easier for Pyros to do because the point is pretty closed in, but on maps like Hightower, which is technically under the same umbrella as maps that are symmetrical, Pyros struggle a bit more. The openness of the map means that closing the gap between yourself and an enemy is much harder than it otherwise would be on some of the more enclosed maps, and the abundance of spawns that the enemy can exit from means that spawn camping is much more of a concerted effort there. I'm still going to put him in... Actually, no, I'll put him in pretty average. I think that he has about the same success rate as attacking Pyro. It's a pretty similar deal, but I will put him at the top because I think he can spawn camp much more easily than attacking Pyros can, and at the point where you're spawn camping, you've basically already won. And while I'm at it, I might as well just start ordering the tiers. I'll put attacking Pyro above the Scouts. I think the Pyro usually has a better time than getting Scout in this mode. As for weapons that you can very easily take advantage of as the Pyro, Flog. That's it, literally just the Flog. You barely even need anything else. Maybe like the panic attack if you're really feeling risky. But against 8 of the 9 classes, the Flog is literally all you want. It's so easy to run into groups of enemies, kill like 6 of them before you die. Even if it's a kamikaze, I mean, you're going to take down so many people with you. The Flog is like a brain-dead choice, but it's so effective. You can get pretty good results out of the Dragon's Fury too. I think the Dragon's Fury is actually preferable if you're up against enemy Pyros, but the Flog is just... It's so hard not to recommend the Flog. Same with the Scorch Shot. Like, it's good for a reason, alright? 16 Pyros spamming the Scorch Shot at a window is going to very quickly take care of anyone you're aiming at. There's not many classes that can survive that much of a Scorch Shot volley. So those are the best weapons if you want to be a team player, but I found that I can actually finish off enemies very easily if I equip the Flare Gun or the Extinguisher, because those weapons benefit based on how much fire has been applied to the enemy, and because everyone on your team is Pyro, everyone's going to be on fire all the time. It's very easy to just fire a flare down like a random angle and get minus 90 in your damage HUD. It's also pretty dang easy to just walk into a crowd of enemies who are already on fire, WM1 with the Extinguisher, and just like hit a big stream of 237s and have a permanent speed boost. Like, you can play clean up Pyro pretty easily, and that's also effective if you just want kills instead of winning, which, I mean, like, That's most people in the game, don't lie to me. But really, any option as Pyro is going to be pretty efficient. Heck, I've even seen people get use out of the gas passer because you're going to be hitting a lot of enemies regardless of where you throw it, and it can be a pretty good repellent for corridors or whatever. But the accursed Scorch Shot Flog combo is way too effective for its own good, and although I may be committing a war crime by saying this, I can't help but recommend it. Demoman is really, really nice in this mode. Because a lot of the enemies are going to be grouped up, and because Demoman has 12 explosives in his kit at any given time to dish out, the amount of people you can deal with in one volley is, like, really, really good. Now, that being said, Demoman does struggle on modes where, or I guess on maps, rather, that are a little bit more open because you don't really have the range. But Demoman in general is very much able to clean up and doesn't really struggle with that many matchups at all. To break it down a wee bit further, attacking Demoman is probably kind of like Soldier. Attacking Demoman is the weakest out of the trio. Not really having any tools to push with is a huge drawback for attacking Demoman. At least Soldier has stuff like banners that he can activate if he wants to help his team push in. Demoman just kind of has to brute force it. He doesn't really have any magic tools like that. But that being said, I still think attacking Demoman has a fair bit of merit. You can pretty easily clean up a lot of classes. The only classes that I think attacking Demoman really struggles with are the same as Soldier. Engineers will ruin your day, and you might be thinking like, oh, it's Demoman. How can engineers ruin your day? Don't worry, we'll get to that in the engineer section. There's a lot to vent about there, but trusting me for now, engineers are the bane of your existence as Demoman, and not really having banners to deal with them makes it significantly worse. And I think soldiers and heavies also cause you a fair bit of problems. On most maps that you can be attacking as Demo, soldiers and heavies just have a much better time on defense than you have on offense. It's not like you don't have any chance of winning, but I definitely think the matchup is not in your favor there. So because of that, I'll leave Demoman usually successful, but he is going toward the bottom. Defense Demoman, on the other hand, is a monster. Being able to spam as many stickies, grenades, and whatever you can at the point, at corridors, wherever you want, really, is amazing. It's very hard for enemy teams to break through Demoman lines because they have to deal with sticky traps, they have to deal with grenades just being spammed left and right, they have to deal with sticky spam from the teammates who aren't setting up traps, and just to make it worse, if you have something that gives you damage resistance to explosives, well then you have to deal with the odd Demonite with the Skull Cutter running right at you and critting your face off. So yeah, you're not really going to have a good time attacking Demoman if they're on defense. I don't know if he's the best defense class in the game, but I would definitely say that he's better than Soldier. Just again, the amount of spam that he can dish out at any given time, and the fact that you have 16 people with the same capability to dish out that amount of spam makes Demoman on defense pretty much a free win in 99% of games. He is insane. Demoman in an even game, on the other hand, I actually find does significantly worse than attacking and defending Demo. I think the number of matchups that you have that are in your favor are the same as attacking Demoman, but some matchups like Pyro are a lot closer than they otherwise would be. So I'm going to put Demoman. I think he's still usually successful, especially because shields are like really good in Koth. Being able to take advantage, again, of just the 1v1 scenario that you can set yourself up for is very, very nice, but I just don't see the same success rates on, like, Capture the Flag or King of the Hill or High Tower or whatever that I see on Attack Defend maps, so I think he'll go a little bit worse. As for weapons, just run stock. Spamming grenades and sticky bombs is the easiest way to play Demoman, it's the most effective way to play Demoman, and other than, like, maybe running the Scottish resistance on defense or a shield on very specific maps, just run stock. I could also definitely see the case for running the Quickie Bomb if you're in a more open map. That does allow you to engage at enemies long distance a lot more safely, but it's unnecessary. I think that if you're doing that, it's more for fun rather than trying to win. Stock is just the way to go. Just spam. That's all you need to do. Heavy is just, it's good, okay? Everyone likes to make the meme of, oh, here comes Russia, once you see like 16 revved heavies walking toward you firing, but it's terrifying. I do not want to be on the receiving end of a team of heavies. One heavy at long range can only output like maybe 15 to 20 damage per second. but you multiply that by 10, and, well, that's your entire health gone in less than a second. The amount of spam that you're able to output, and the fact that enemies can't really dodge it in the same way they can rockets or grenades or whatever, means that all you have to do is basically do what I call the Death Star strategy, where you have all of the heavies concentrate on one person at a time, they cease to exist seconds after getting in your sight lines, and then you move on to the next person. Does it require a bit of coordination? Yes, but the margin of error for what if everyone's not doing that? Oh, well, it doesn't matter, because really you only need like 5 or 6 people firing at the same person for it to matter, and they're going to melt. I don't think Heavy is the perfect class in this mode. Although minigun spam is really, really good, the lack of mobility hurts him a lot, and the fact that he is susceptible to high damage options like sentries and explosives does make him a little bit more vulnerable on attack, but on defense, dude, you're not getting beat. We'll get there, though. Right now, attacking Heavy is pretty good. I don't think he is quite in the easy win tier, but it's pretty dang close. I think that as far as attack goes, really all you have to do is get all of your heavies to move in a big pack, just hold WM1 and you're going to win. There isn't really much you can do other than like spamming with splash damage, and if you don't have that, well then good luck. I'm going to put Heavy at the very top of... Actually, I'll put him behind Soldier. I'll put him very close to the top if usually successful. All it takes is just move forward and fire, and there's a good chance you're going to sweep the entire game. But he is still susceptible to explosives to a point where I don't think it's an easy win. I think you'll still have to put in some amount of effort. Defense Heavy, on the other hand, does not suffer from those problems, and because he doesn't have to run back to the front line after every death, you just walk out of spawn and win. It's an easy win. Literally, all you have to do is fire at a corridor, and then when you run out of ammo, have your teammate do the same thing. It's the same deal as Soldier. There's literally no weakness to heavies just standing on the point and firing at anyone who gets near them. They have so much health, they have built-in healing, they have hit scan DPS that's like tracking based and not projectile based, so it can't be reflected. Yeah, there's not really much you can do against defense heavies. I'm gonna put them, I'll put him in between Soldier and Demo. I don't think he's as good as Demoman, but he is definitely better than Soldier. Now, even Heavy, on the other hand, I don't think has the same advantages. Because it's a lot easier for certain classes to set up 1v1s in modes like Payload Race or like King of the Hill or Capture the Flag, you definitely have to be more on your toes and make a much more dedicated effort to staying with your team on those maps, to where I wouldn't say that it's as good as attacking Heavy. That being said, Heavy can just spawn camp a lot of classes. It's the same deal as Pyro, right? There are several games that I've been in that we just couldn't get out of spawn because heavies were standing there WM1ing. This is no exception, so I'll put him, we'll say right here. Definitely unusually successful, though. The weapons that you want to use as Heavy, I don't even think it matters. All of Heavy's weapons are identical. Just use the Tommyslav if the map is open, use the stock if the map is closed. You can get use out of literally anything, okay? You can figure it out for yourself. I will say one of the more fun things to do is trying to flank and then just going on rampages with the Killing Gloves of Boxing and just getting one kill and then shredding enemies with crit miniguns. But in terms of effectiveness, I don't think it's going to be much better than just standing with your team and firing down a corridor for the entire match. And then for the secondary, just run the sandwich. Just spam. Anytime you don't need health, just drop a sandwich to anyone who does. The fact that you have that much healing in your economy makes you immediately better than the other team, who, unless they're medic or engineer, cannot compete with that. So Engineer is broken, okay? Any problems that Engineer normally faces if you're the only engineer on the team cease to exist if you have an entire team of engineers. I don't think Engineer is even a beatable class half the time. For instance, one of your biggest weaknesses as a solo engineer is running out of metal. Well, that doesn't really matter if your entire team has dispensers down that they aren't going to be using most of the time, and also because your entire team will just randomly go upgrade your buildings because they have nothing better to do. So even like the cost of setup barely matters, because I can just put like a level 1 sentry down on the back lines, forget about it for like 30 seconds, and when I come back, it'll be level 3 because the Gibbous engineer, who is just an absolute Chad, is just going around upgrading everything, and I don't have to think about it. Engineer also runs into the problem of not really having much durability. Well, that doesn't matter. You take 100 damage, you retreat into the, like, cluster of dispensers for 5 seconds, and you're all the way at full. But the most broken part about Engineer is his secondaries. Engineer has 2 secondaries that ruin the entire game of Class Wars. The Short Circuit completely deletes Engineers, Demomen, really anyone you can think of. The Short Circuit, in fact, becomes a decent DPS option because everyone on your team can be spamming them at the same time, and because of that, you just have this, like, constant laser beam of penetrating damage that clears out anyone that's trying to spawn camp you. What should be his biggest counters of soldiers and engineers literally cannot get anything in because your entire team can just sit in a cluster of dispensers, spam short circuits down the corridors that the soldiers are trying to spam to, and now you have the superior spam option. And if you don't want to contribute to the spam of the short circuit, well, you could just plop down a mini sentry, use the Wrangler, and now you have an effective 300 health thing that does, like, insane damage. For some reason, you basically have a heavy at your disposal, but if the heavy dies, then it doesn't matter because now you can build another one. So if you think about it, Engineer basically has the ability to spawn heavies that don't have to respawn, but then he also has the Engineer with, like, a shotgun or whatever. It's insane. I have no idea what they were thinking when they gave Engineer some of the secondaries he has in this game, and especially in Class Wars where running out of metal is a very rare occurrence unless you're trying to, like, go off and flank on your own. It just amplifies the problem hundreds of times more. So let's talk about the individual versions, shall we? You might be thinking, oh, it's Engineer on attack. He's not really that good, is he? No, he's fantastic. It's very rare for Engineer on attack to not win. The only way to beat Engineer on attack is to mercilessly spawn camp him so hard that even the Short Circuit can't save him. What classes can do that? Well, basically none of them, because the Short Circuit, like, hits through spawn doors, so you don't even have to open the door to deal damage to half the people. But I think heavies, like, theoretically, heavies should be able to do it because they can also have built-in healing. I say theoretically because I don't know if that's ever happened, but that is a possible strategy that you can use. The reason that Engineer on attack is so incredibly good is that once you have a couple buildings set up, the entire zone becomes unflankable. All you have to do is set up a couple minis at your spawn, maybe a level 3 or 2, and because you can wrangle them or delete anything that's going to cause harm to your sentries, well, then that entire section of the map is now owned by the Engineers. So all the Engineers have to do is continue pushing up in microscopic increments and taking hold of small sections of the maps very gradually, and eventually, before you know it, they own the entire map with nothing you can do. This happens on 9 out of 10 matches if you're going up against attack Engineers. It's very rare for the game to end with anything other than Engineers have sentries surrounding your last point. You can't really deal with anything. I think other than Dust Bowl, which even then you can just, like, Wrangler spam your way to victory, it's very hard to repel Engineers who are trying to push up, because all it takes is one cheeky sentry that's now wrangled, and your entire team is now in trouble. So because of this, I unironically think that Attack Engineer is better than every other class except for Defending Demoman in this tier. I fully believe that attacking Engineers don't have any bad matchups, and the only bad matchups that he does have can be dictated by the map instead of the actual class-by-class, like, matchups, I guess. Now, Defense Engineer, you want to know why I made the dominant tier? This guy is going right to the top. Engineer on defense has no weaknesses, not a single one. Soldiers are the closest thing that you can do to be a team of defending Engineers, because Soldier at least has, like, the direct hit and banners and cow manglers, and if you use all of those in combination, you can, like, very occasionally cheese out sentry nests that aren't very smartly placed. Very occasionally, though. Defending Engineers are so incredibly hard to break through. There's nothing you can do against them. Scout can't bonk because he gets knocked back. Soldier and Demoman can't spam because they get deleted by the Short Circuit. Pyro can't do anything because he gets outranged. Heavy, I think, has the best matchups on like earlier points where sentries have to be more out in the open, but even heavies can't really compete with that many sentries with wranglers spammed at them at once. Even classes like spy and sniper, who normally have really good tools to delete sentries, those being long range and sappers, cannot compete. All you have to do is place sentries in smart spots, and there's nothing that those classes can do. It is hilariously bad. There is literally not a single reason you should lose as defense engineer. It is overwhelmingly powerful, up to the point where if you lose, it is a skill difference. And I mean that literally, like your team is just so much worse than the enemy team that not even the crutch of defense engineer could save you. Engineer on symmetrical maps, on the other hand, definitely carries over a lot of that spunk. The fact that a lot of even or symmetrical maps don't really have time limits, like capture the flag or payload race, means that the attack engineer strategy of very gradually take definitive control over certain portions of the map and just keep slowly pushing up is a great strategy, because there's no time limit for you to take control of the entire map, and eventually attacking engineers will turn into defensive engineers because you own the entire map and people can't get out of spawn anymore. I don't think that even engineers are as dominant as defensive engineers, because you do have to put in a dedicated effort to get your team to the point where they own the entire map. That being said, it's not that hard, and once you do it, there's basically no counter, so you're going right to the top of the easy win tier, because he has all of the traits of attacking engineer to benefit him, and then eventually it turns into defensive engineer, so pretty good in between, if you ask me. As for the weapons that you should be using for the engineer, I've already explained the biggest two. The short circuit and the wrangler break the entire game. They're so unbalanced in this mode that I honestly think that you should put custom nerfs in place to prevent them from being the way they are. At least that way, soldiers can do something against engineers. You can also get quite a bit of mileage out of your shotgun too. Even just spamming rescue ranger bolts down corridors can do wonders. The rescue ranger is really good for going up against classes with splash damage, because you can just heal your sentry without any inherent risk to yourself. The panic attack is really good on offense, I found, because if you spam short circuits, quickly switch to the panic attack, fire off a shot, and then pull out the short circuit again, you can basically have like a permanent projectile deleting field and never give like opposing soldiers or demomen the time to actually attack you. So that's a neat little strategy that I found that mainly benefits attacking engineer, that just denies soldiers and demomen even harder, but really any primary is gonna get you by. Even a Thompson. Honest to God, there isn't much counter to 5 engineers spamming a Pomson down a corridor. Like, what are you gonna do? It's basically a rocket, except you can't even reflect it or really dodge it because it's so slow. Or I guess to rephrase, dodging it doesn't matter because there are so many of them that you can't really dodge that many anyway. And as for melees, use the Jag or the Eureka effect. There you go. Free win right there. Oh, another thing that I forgot to mention about engineers that just makes them that much more stupid is that they're the only class in the game that gets to skip the walk back to the front lines, because you are going to have at least 10 teleporters down at any given time. So the fact that engineers have better healing than every other class but medic, infinite ammo, infinite metal because of how many dispensers you'll have down, instant ability to go back to the front lines, higher damage than everyone else, higher durability than everyone else because of wrangled sentries, and you can have your sentries do the work for you, means that he beats every other class in the game in every other area. Why is this a thing? This is so broken. Medic, significantly less exciting, but Medic does have a lot of surprising nuance that you can get used to. Medic is an interesting class in Class Wars because he doesn't have really any dominant matchups, but he doesn't have any matchups except for Engineer that he just can't win either. I think if the general skill floor in the lobby was like really high, like if you had competitive players on both teams, Medics could sweep, because theoretically all you'd have to do is Uber chain for the entire game and there's nothing that the opposing team could do. Combine that with the fact that Medic has really good tools to push in, that being Uber Charge. You have the Crits Krieg, which doesn't seem like it would do a lot at first because Medic doesn't have a lot of firepower, but just critzing a crossbow or even just a Blitzauger does a lot. Plus the Vaccinator, which shuts down a lot of classes if you can get your team running it, means that Medic has the tools to deal with really most classes in the game. The problem is that Medic's tools require a lot more finesse to use than a lot of other classes, which are just spam, and a lot of the time, you're not going to get put on the teams that has the average capability to do that. So, the Medic, in my experience, usually falls somewhere in the middle where you have, like, half of your team doing decently and then half the team just running in and dying and never Ubering anyone, which kind of sucks, but you still have a pretty good selection of tools to deal with regardless. Attacking Medic isn't amazing. I'm going to put on average attacking Medic in minimal chance. I don't think that there's really a lot that you can do if you happen to get Medic on attack. Because most teams, even if you have, like, really good vaccinator users on your team, most classes can just spam you out very easily. Like, if you just do the math in your head and you think that, okay, maybe it would take, like, 3 soldiers, or a Demoman or whatever to clear out a group of medics, but if everyone's using the vaccinator, that gives you 4 times the effective health, but that's only 12 soldiers or Demomen required to swipe your entire team, and they have 16 on their team, so it doesn't usually end up mattering. I'll at least put Medic at the top of minimal chance. Like I said, the better your team is, the higher your chances get, which is like exponential versus the other ones, which are just proportional. But most of the time, I don't think attacking medics have much of a chance to deal with some of the just ridiculous amounts of spam that the enemy team can put out. Defensive medics, on the other hand, actually do a surprisingly good job. I don't know how, I don't know why, but defensive medics are probably one of the better classes in the game, or at least in the top half. I would much rather have defensive medics than attacking scouts, at least. I think a lot of it comes down to the ability for multiple medics to spam syringe guns down corridors, doing a surprising amount of damage. Combine that with the Kritzkrieg and just random Ubers thrown in, the fact that your entire team at least should be healed most of the time, and the Crusader's crossbow, allowing for firing galleries from galleries, something like that, from long range to be a thing. Defensive medic just performs better than you would think a group of medics should, which is surprising to me too, but I mean, I have beat attacking engineers, soldiers, heavies, demos. Like, again, defensive medic just doesn't have any matchups that he cannot win. Like, he at least has a fairly good chance against everything. It's just, you have to put in a little bit more effort to get that result. And even medics, I think, suffer a lot of the same flaws attacking medics can. You're gonna get spawn camped, even with Ubers. Spawn camping on medic is much more of a problem. Medic also, and you'll see this with the rest of the support classes, Medic just cannot capture and hold a point. That is a big problem with him, that on attack defense at least can get mitigated because you can literally just body block with Ubers in hallways to prevent people from getting to the point. But when you're on entirely separate sides of the map and there's nothing preventing the enemy team from like just going on top of you on like King of the Hill or whatever, then yeah, you're not going to be able to hold the control point even if you're getting like decent kills on average. So that was Medic. I think you can get use out of really any of Medic's tools. The Crusader's crossbow is by far the best, although the Blitzsauger also puts in a lot of work. The Crusader's crossbow, again, is just the spam king. Literally just fire it in a direction. No matter who it hits, you're going to be contributing something, so it's hard to not recommend that. And then most mediguns, I think, do the job pretty well. I would say avoid the quick fix if you happen to get that, because chances are even the insane amount of healing that the quick fix gives you is not going to counteract the even more insane amount of spam that's going to be thrown your way. So yeah, the quick fix is kind of useless, and the amount of people on your team compensates for the extra healing that the quick fix would give you anyway. Stock is really, really good, especially if you can set up Uber chains. It does take coordination, which I think this is the only class in the game that really needs coordination to work. But if you can set up just over comms or something, getting like a couple people on your team to set up Uber chains, unless you're against pyros or engineers, it's surprisingly effective. You can go on very long kill streaks and cause a lot of headache for the enemy team, which allows the rest of your team to kind of push in behind you. So in ideal circumstance, that would be a good way to play medic. I just don't see that happening in the general match, which does kind of suck. And then for melee, use the Uber Saw. There's no reason not to use the Uber Saw or the Amputator. I guess the Amputator can could also put in some work. But the Uber Saw is so good because in a situation where everyone is going to be at max overheal and getting Uber is going to be a lot harder, even if you're one of the few medics that's like dedicated to attacking, you can still build up Uber, which is so insanely good if you can. Uber Saw is really good, but if you also want to be that person who just spams the amputator taunt and heals your entire team constantly, then that's also admirable, and I fully support you. Not to mention, it's a good strategy. So now we're on to Sniper and Spy. You've noticed that, wow, the bottom two tiers haven't been filled yet. Don't worry, we'll do that in due time. Sniper is, theoretically, right, Sniper would be the best class in the entire game because being able to instant kill everyone from any range is kind of a broken ability, and the fact that you have 16 people doing that at the same time would make it impossible for the enemy team to sneak up on you, right? Well, no, because even though snipers have really good offensive capability, they cannot do objectives for the life of them. Sniper is a very selfish class, and when the win condition is do the objective and they can't do the objective, it causes a lot of problems. Attacking Sniper is the worst out of the three variants because snipers have zero ability to push in, right? You can at least get picks from long range, but it's like, if you pick off a Demoman or even like 5 Demomen who are spamming down a corridor, well, that leaves 11 left, and it's not hard for more Demomen to come to take the place of the one you just killed. It's kind of the medic situation where most of the time, your team is not going to be anywhere near good enough to compete with the amount of spam that a power class could put out. And without the ability to put in any elbow grease yourself, it's going to be kind of a very one-sided game. Attacking Sniper usually gets spawn camped. It's very rare that they don't. Even medics can spawn camp them with bullet soggers, which if you're getting spawn camped by medics, mate, you're in really rough shape. It's going to go in the Sands tier. Really, you are not going to have fun if you're playing attacking Sniper. I don't encourage anyone to surrender. I say, at the very least, try to play out the match, but this is one of the worst classes in the game by far. Defensive Sniper has a little bit easier time. Defensive Sniper at least has a good matchup against 2 classes, those being Sniper and Spy. Because Sniper can't really push, but he can stand his ground, defense is naturally going to be a little bit more oriented for him. I would even go as far as to say that a good team of defensive snipers has a pretty good chance against some of the better attacking classes that are higher up on the tier list, especially because you have the some of the secondaries that can help compete, like the Girardi you can just chuck into groups of enemies, and that can help your team pick off groups more. Like if you have someone dedicated to suicide with the Bushwhacker, it can be a strategy, but it's just not great. I'll still put him at a minimal chance, but it's not going to be as good as a lot of the other classes. I will put him above Defending Scout, though. I still think he has that much going for him. And then Sniper on even maps. This was kind of the hardest one to rate, because the map that you play on really affects a lot. Honestly, on like Harvest, I would probably say that Sniper could be even as high as usually successful. Because on maps that have ridiculously dumb sniper sight lines, the fact that the entire team can't really peek out of their own base to do anything is really, really good, and means that you can kind of capture the point without much effort. But on normal circumstances, you're going to have a lot of challenge, like maintaining the point or getting the intel or whatever, so I'm going to throw him in minimal chance. I'll say behind. Actually, no, because he has a couple good maps, I'll put him ahead of Defensive Sniper, but honestly, they're about the same in terms of effectiveness. I wouldn't want to get him regardless. And the more I think about it, I'm actually going to move Scout above these two, because I think Scout still has a couple tools like Mad Milk that allow him to hold points a little bit more than Sniper, who just gets overwhelmed a little bit too easily. As far as what weapons you should be using at Sniper, this is kind of a hard one to recommend because it really depends. Obviously, work around your counters. If you're against Pyros, use the Danger Shield. If you're against Spies, use the Razorback. If you're not up against any of those, the Cozy Camper and the Girardi are really good bets. The Sniper Rifle you use, honestly, I think you can get pretty good use out of even most of them. Even like the Sydney Sleeper and the Classic, which are normally terrible. If you're going up against light classes like scouts or even engineers, just charging up a classic can be really good. I mean, honestly, that's probably one of the better weapons. The Huntsman becomes really, really good in this mode because it allows you to effectively contribute to spam, get random instant kills. It's basically just a better direct hit spam down corridors, which is really good. It allows you to deal with people at close range, which is something that Sniper really struggles with outside of a very long cooldown Jarate Bushwhacker combo. So yeah, you can't really go wrong with any of his primaries, and secondaries are just kind of there to help you counter whatever you need. Melees barely matter if we're being honest. So Sniper, just play around the match. It's kind of hard to recommend weapons, but yeah, he's not a very good class, unfortunately. Spy is by far the worst class in the entirety of Class Wars. The entire point of Spy, as the old adage in competitive goes, is not to say, oh wow, I didn't know there was a spy there. It's to say, oh wow, I didn't know they had a spy on their team. Guess what? The match announces that the entire other team will be spies before you even are able to leave your spawn. The biggest strength of Spy, which is getting picks while people are distracted, does not work because no one will ever be distracted because everyone's always trying to get sneaky picks. Spy has zero ability to push. Even the Dead Ringer has a long enough cooldown that you're not going to be able to fend off any spam. The most you can hope for on Spy, honest to God, is like getting a couple Ambassador headshots, Dead Ringing out, getting a health pack, and waiting for it to recharge. It's not even fun. Attacking Spy suffers the brunt of it very hard. Attacking Spy, I would dare say, is unwinnable in a lot of circumstances. If you get Attacking Spy, again, I hate to encourage surrendering, but you don't really have much of a shot, dude. Just go ahead and surrender. He has zero good matchups, not a single one that even has a microscopic chance of him winning. Even defending spies and snipers destroy him way more easily than everyone else in the game. You have no ability to push. You are the frailest class in the game. You have no options that make you any more tanky or provide any team support. So yeah, you just kind of suck. Defensive spies, on the other hand, I think can put up slightly more of a fight. Not much, but very slightly. Defensive spies, at the very least, can regularly beat attacking spies and can usually beat attacking snipers depending on team composition and maps. Because of that, I'm going to at least not put the defending spy in the you just might as well surrender immediately upon seeing the text box tier. You can at least do a little bit sometimes, but it's still not that much. And on defense, you also have the luxury of not getting spawn camped for however long. You can at least finish the match like a man while everyone else just sweeps the objective, so at least your suffering is short. And honestly, I would even go as far as to say that defensive spy is above attacking sniper because he literally just beats attacking snipers. That's cool at least. And spy on an even map like capture the flag or whatever suffers. Okay, you're just gonna get spawn camped. You just have to deal with it. The only reason I'm not going to put him in any percent glitchless surrender speedrun is because the matchups that he does have are very slightly better. And it's also possible to get spy versus spy, so he technically only loses 8.5 matchups instead of a full 9, so I mean, I guess it's not that bad if you think about it. The best weapon that you have is Spy is the Kazatsky kick. If you can make the enemy team bored enough that most of them quit, maybe you can get auto bounce to the other team that doesn't have to play Spy. That's the best suggestion I can give you. In all seriousness, though, the Dead Ringer, Ambassador, and like maybe Spy Sickle, I don't know. That's probably the best loadout you're getting, dude. There's not really much you have. You're not going to get, like, any backstab, so the Diamondback is barely worth it. The Ambassador can at least get crits on command, but ever since they nerfed the Diamondback, like, okay, I even remember playing Class Wars like a long time ago, and spies were a force to be reckoned with because you had to deal with getting hit for 102 by the entire enemy team. He wasn't good back then by any means, but he at least had the ability to push just by overwhelming you with crits. Nowadays, though, when you can't even do that, it's pathetic. The Ambassador's still the best option just because everything else kind of sucks by comparison, but you don't really have many options. Very occasionally, you can, like, cloak behind the enemy team if you're up against like Demoman or something, you might be able to flank everyone and get a couple picks because they just can't really deal with you at close range very well. But other than that, just, yeah, good luck, dude. You're not making it out of there unharmed. So anyway, that is the Class Wars tier list broken down into attack, defense, and even maps. I've been playing an ungodly amount of Class Wars for the last week to 2 to a month to, I don't know, it's been too long and my brain is completely melted by that point, but hopefully you enjoyed my efforts. Class Wars is a very fun mode. I do wish they would add more maps into the rotation servers, and I wish they'd make it so RTD isn't as much of an issue. But the mode as a whole is a lot of fun if you're not like a super try-hard and are the like zesty Jesus type who will throw your keyboard through your monitor if you get killed 3 times in a row. Anyway, let me know what you think. If people like tier lists, I have a couple other ideas. I wanted to do a roll the dice tier list, and then I realized that I'd have to get like footage of every single roll the dice effect, and it's random, and it's pain, all right? So I didn't really want to do that yet, but that may happen eventually, so keep your eye out. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you like this video, make sure to like. If you hated this video, go commit/surrender, and most importantly, have a good one.